Hi, and welcome to Gamers Explain. I'm Crawlock. In today's episode, I've asked the same question of 10 different Gamers Plain users, and I'll play you back their respective answers. The question I've asked is, what do you miss in play-by-post from live gaming? And conversely, what do you miss in live gaming from play-by-post? I hope you enjoy their answers as much as I did. I guess one of the things that I want to do this time is ask a bunch of questions of a bunch of different people and the same questions, and then like some kind of documentarian with fictional editing software that I don't actually have, edit all of these, all of the responses together into some kind of like format. And so then I could release an episode theoretically just answering one question with a whole bunch of different perspectives. That's my plan. But that and all of those issues, those are all problems for future Crawlock. So
I would also like to commend you on being able to pronounce documentarian, because I would not know how to pronounce that if I read it on a page.
Yeah. So you said you've been playing in some real life games. Has that been recently, or?
Oh no, I wish it was. I've been thinking more and more about it. So I just moved up to a new location in Virginia, and I'm running into that issue where, like, how do you meet people like as an adult? Like, I can't like hang out at a high school. It's weird if you do that when you're 35, as it turns out.
Unless
you get the cops calling you for stuff like that.
Yeah, unless you've got a panel van, then it's okay.
Yeah, free dice and just see who rolls up. Now, I've been thinking the last time I actually got a group was literally like a post on Reddit, like, someone please adopt me, I'm a kind player, sort of thing. So I'm legitimately thinking about doing something else like that. But for a giant, like, mega city, like legitimately this city is 50 miles across, there's remarkably not much chatter anywhere that I can see about like RPGs or something. The game stores in the area don't really host D&D nights or anything. It's strange. It's be interesting trying to make something happen.
It is interesting. It's not Lynchburg.
No. I'm near DC.
Right.
Like around that area. But like, that's the problem, is because it's split into so many different areas, there's not one central community. Washington, DC is like right there, but right there is 45 minutes from here. Like, I don't want to go to DC for a game night. That's a pain in the butt.
Yeah.
Well, I definitely want to be in person, but trying to be in person is tough when it's a really crowded area with bad traffic.
Yeah. I live in a small town outside of a big city, so 45 minutes is just if I want to go to the bookstore, right?
Oh. Oh, that's bad.
Yeah. But surprisingly, this small town of like 30-some thousand people has got a fairly robust gaming community. So,
yeah. Like, you got to wonder how that works. Like, how did that? I don't know. Like, rural towns in the South, if you say D&D, they're gonna like throw a Bible at you.
Yeah.
That's in my experience. Like, it's weird, and you're weird, and you should get away from my daughter, sort of thing.
Yeah.
So I'm jealous of that for you.
We do have an inordinate number of churches in this town. It is true.
It's rural. That's normal.
Yeah. Yeah. So what do you miss from in real live gaming that you don't get on play-by-post?
Holy crap, the speed. I love play-by-post. I really do. It's turned into a real, like, a legitimate hobby for me. But I mean, like, I miss being able to go into a small dungeon and finish it like that night, instead of being here like months from now.
Yeah.
What did we decide that the was it Harrigan transactions, like, the go back and forth between the DM and the players and back again? You could do that just so fast in person. You can't do that on PBP, and it's such a bummer, because it could really drag things out. Like, I enjoy the idea in D&D 5e of playing a grappler, like somebody who wrestles, but there's so many contested checks that it just brings combat to a standstill for days. It's just not worth it. It can't be done well in PBP unless you're playing like back and forth, like every night at 8 p.m. will be on sort of thing. So I mean, yeah, that's the main thing. That and stupid, goofy, joking around inside jokes. Like I'm watching Critical Role, and they're all like laughing and having side talks and having inside jokes and bringing goofy props, and I miss that camaraderie, that closeness. And you could kind of do it in forums to a point, but it's not the same.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's just there's things you can only simulate in text form. You'll never quite get it the same way.
For sure. Yeah, it's definitely not the same social experience.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you went back to live games, what do you think you would miss from play-by-post that you wouldn't get in a live game?
It's really hard to RP in person. Like it's hard to let your guard down and be something else. It's your goofy voices, you're forced to think on the spot. And for me, I don't like when people watch me when I'm trying to improvise, I guess. If I'm at home, I can take a minute, think about what my character would say, and like get into what they're doing and write like a paragraph or 2 paragraphs of like something interesting that they're doing. But in person, it's like it just feels thinner almost. But at the same time, there's so much that's passed through body language that you can't do in play by post that it kind of balances out almost. Like a funny voice and some body language goes a long way versus a paragraph of narration.
Yeah.
And it's pros and cons of both forms, really. But yeah, that's the main thing. It's just trying to take your time and think about what you want to say and how you want to say it is a lot harder if you're in person. You got to think about it really quick. So yeah, that.
Yeah, I've definitely found that too. And even playing with people I've played with for years, when you're on the spot and you're in your head of your character and suddenly something really awkward is asked of your character, and you just kind of sit there and just try and figure it out. And with play by post, at least you can sit back and figure out what you really want to say. And
yeah
a good GM will read your body language and say, okay, why don't we come back to you, and then move to the next person. And
yeah, they see somebody who just you can tell they're not feeling the moment, or you can tell like they're enjoying this, or you can tell like they're frustrated. Play by post, you're just going off of, oh, this person hasn't posted in 3 days. Maybe they're not enjoying it, or maybe they're in the hospital. Who knows? It could be either one.
Yeah. Yeah. So we're a couple of years into this COVID thing almost. And I don't know about you, but I've had almost zero live gaming since March of 2020. Over last fall, we did some. We had 5 or 6 sessions with a group and playing D&D, and then this past summer we've had a couple sessions playing Supernatural, the role-playing game. And but really, that's a big change from playing twice a month for the last 25 years. Mm-hmm. What about you? Have you been going to the store and playing live, or getting together with your friends, or?
I play a game one Friday, every second Friday at the organism I frequent. I used to have a role-playing game club there where I would play every Thursday, but of course that stopped because of COVID. Now we could start playing again, but I'm starting to have a little bit less free time to be the one running the role-playing club. I'm basically, the organism I frequent is an organism that helps people who suffer from schizophrenia and personality disorder or other mental illnesses related to schizophrenia. And since I was diagnosed with schizoid personality disorder in 2014, I kind of fit in that. And what they're doing to help people reintegrate society, they have this work environment that people with mental illness can work in. And what they're doing is they have this little digital printing place. And since I studied in desktop publishing, that was my element. So I went there. I've been doing volunteering for a while. Now I'm on a special program with welfare to reintroduce me in the workforce. But what's also happening is that our senior graphic designer that's working there right now, I think he's seriously thinking of retiring in a couple of years. And that means that I would probably take his place. And I think he's trying to train me. So I don't really have the time to play a game there and to run a game there anymore. But I can play. There's another friend who was in my role-playing club who also wanted to do a game. Before COVID, he was running D&D 5th edition once every second Friday. He had some trouble with that because he's one of the people with schizophrenia who frequent the organism, and people with schizophrenia, they have a lot of difficulty with concentration.
Oh, okay.
And preparing a 5th edition game was way too much for him. And I suggest that he pick up an easier system. I proposed the Bare Bones Fantasy for him, and he picked it up and he went with it, and he's happy now. And he's running his game every second Friday, so I'm playing Bare Bones Fantasy with him every second Friday.
Oh, great. Have we played Bare Bones together?
Almost. We're playing Frontier Space. That's like the sci-fi version of Bare Bones Fantasy.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I thought so. Viking 1051 has been running a long-running, though slowly paced Bare Bones Fantasy game, and the system's pretty solid. It's easy. It's
pretty fun.
Yeah. So you've been playing a fair bit on Play by Post, as you have for years. And what do you miss if you switched entirely from or decreased your schedule from live role playing? What do you think you miss most about live games that you just don't get on Play by Post?
The spontaneity that you have around the table sometimes. Like the group might be in trouble and you need that one great roll to pull the group out of trouble, and you roll your dice and it comes right. You succeed the roll and everyone's around the table is cheering. Or maybe there might be this really funny situation where you're all in and you're just laughing. You're just laughing, folded in two, laughing, holding your side because that thing just happened. You're like, oh my God, I can't believe he said that, and something. You have really spontaneous moment like that around the table that you just can't have with Play by Post.
That's right. Yeah. There's some analog, I guess, to that in out of character comments, but it isn't that spontaneous burst of emotion.
There's some funny moments in Play by Post game, but you're missing that spontaneity.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things I miss is the deep immersion you get. Like if you're playing in a setting and you're live at the table and your group isn't the kind that just wanders off topic all the time. But if you're focused, you can be deep in that character, deep in that setting, immersed into it for hours at a time. And we just don't get that at Play by Post. You break off and you do other things, and you
have real life, so you're constantly taken out of the immersion.
Yeah. There's a different kind of immersion that you're getting from Play by Post, but you're just not getting that live, unbroken immersion. I think that's what I miss.
You almost get it. You can almost get the same immersion of real life role playing game in play by post, but it usually happens when you have a lot of time. You have this answer. You have to make your post. You have to answer something, and you need what happened really, and you go back in the chat log, and then you start immersing yourself again. So it can happen, but it's rarer. It's circumstantial, and it usually happens when you have this post to make, and you need to remind yourself of what happened. What was the question that was asked? But it happens from time to time, and that's an interesting feeling.
Yeah.
I've read some of my. One time I had this Urban Shadow game that ended, and for some reason I don't know why I decided to go back and read what happened and all the events of the game, and I was like in this nostalgia place. This is a very nice feeling.
Yeah, it's certainly not missing from play by post, and I think that's important to bring up. Is that it's there's a different kind of immersion you get from play by post because you have so much notes, so much detail have been recorded. It's better than memory.
Mm-hmm.
Do you use, or does your friend that's running Bare Bones Fantasy, does he use ambient music in the background while you're playing?
No.
No. Wonder if that's an issue with the schizophrenia, having additional sounds in the background, or
No, we've tried it in the past with ambient music. His brother had a Bluetooth speaker, and he paired it with his phone, and sometime during some of my game, during my role-playing club, we would have some background music. But his brother left the club. It's probably gonna be another question. It's probably gonna be relevant to another question you're gonna ask me later. But yeah, his brother had to leave the club at some point, and since then we didn't have any music simply because we weren't really equipped to have music. But it's not a problem for schizophrenic people to have background music in their games.
Yeah, I suppose. Knowing nothing about it. So background music has always been a big part of games at my table. So when I'm playing at the house, we generally set up a whole bunch of couches in the basement around the TV, and so I'd use my PlayStation to channel music off the computer and play it through the TV, and then the TV would just have some kind of artistic, maybe the picture of the earth kind of, a screensaver while the music was playing. And we always make playlists for games. So if we started a Deadlands game, we would have a lot of Western horror themed music. And I find that it just really becomes something we look forward to, and spend a lot of time making playlists when I start a game.
Yeah, if you use background music for your games, that's something you really need to do. Playlists. Don't be afraid to put that one song on loop for a long while.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you're gonna have some strange situation where your players are at the inn eating their lunch, and you have this epic sweeping Lord of the Rings song that starts. And it literally happened in one of my game. I'm describing the guy eating his mutton chop, and all of a sudden the Steve Jackson scored and we start laughing, and I decided to roll with it, and I told him, and this is the best mutton chop you ever had in a long life. And he was like, yeah, I sure hope so. It comes with its own epic score. Yeah?
Yeah.
But yeah, that's when I realized, if you're gonna have background music, do playlists, because you're gonna run into this weirdness otherwise.
Yeah, and so I've taken it a little bit further and had multiple playlists, and so have a combat score. you know, lots of Conan or Red Sonja and, you know, heavy, even techno music, just high speed, you know, lots of action and drama. And then use bands like Delirium, which are kind of ambient horror, doom kind of sounds, and use that for tension building and just kind of switch back and forth. Because, yeah, like you, we would have this TV on, and it would show the title of the song, right? And so if a Rhapsody song, Endless Rage of the Titans, comes up, suddenly the players would get very excited. But, you know, maybe that wasn't always the appropriate time for, you know, to crash Titans into their party. But
yeah, I did something very similar, but when I was playing Expedition to Castle Ravenloft, I looked for a lot of Castlevania soundtracks.
yeah. Yeah, I've seen you put post videos in the game too. The start of combat, you put a video, and other people have done that in play by post as well to try and recapture that. It's like, here's some music to really get you thinking about it. So the opposite question then is, what do you miss from play by post when you're playing in live games? What do you, now that you've experienced play by post quite a bit and you go back to a live game, what do you find you miss and you can't do?
I'd have to say that the slower pace of games in play by post usually leaves you a lot of more time to think about your answer, think about how you're going to describe this room your players enter. When you're playing in real life, you know, you're on the spot. You have to describe the room now, and if you make a mistake, you have to run with it. Like, you forget to describe, I don't know, you forget to describe a torch, and that torch is related to a trap or a secret room. Oh, guys, I forgot there was the torch there. In play by post, you describe the room, then before you press, you know, send, you have the time to sit there, reread your post. Did I forget anything? Okay, no, that all looks fine. Then you press post. Oh crap, I forget this. Edit.
Yeah.
And then you edit it over.
Yeah.
Then, okay.
Yeah. Going back to your earlier note about going to your Urban Shadows game, I find the note taking particularly problematic with some groups. And then the first step of every game is like, well, do you guys remember what you did last time? And they're like, no. And then you mention stuff like, oh yeah, okay. And then they forget names. But with play by post,
Link to a certain post in the game.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's right. So sometimes I try to make sometimes I try to circumvent that. Sometimes I made a thread that was, you know, note keeping. I did this for Expedition to Castle Ravenloft because there was so much the card reading from Madame Eva, for example. So the player were using this note keeping thread for that. Should probably do it for my Five Torches Deep game. Now I'm thinking about it. There's going to be a lot of elements since I'm playing a lot of old classics.
Yeah. The user Santouche, who runs a lot of Delta Green and Call of Cthulhu before he vanished. When I played Delta Green with him, because it's a heavily a mystery game, it's about getting all the clues together, putting them together, and then going mad because it's, you know, a Cthulhu-based game. But there's so many clues and so many things going together that he created threads for that and started the ball for us, saying, okay, let's put in spoiler tags or whatever, here's information we found. And then we started adding to it as a group diary. And it became, you know, instrumental in working through the adventure.
Yeah, for certain games that I'd say that's almost required.
Yeah.
if you have a lot of intrigues, a lot of mystery, you're probably going to need a note-keeping thread for your game.
Yeah. And if the players are on top of it, maybe they're doing that themselves at the table, but I've got some players that they would just write constantly through the adventure, and 5 or 6 pages later, and then over the course of the next week they would type it all up and email it to everybody. But that's pretty dedicated, and yeah, you can't really expect that.
Then you end up with a sort of situation where your player has written quite a literal novel, and you bring him an NPC. Oh yeah, that guy, and then you start flipping through his novel to find where you met him before.
Yeah. I think the other thing I miss too is I kind of like having my books at the table. This is like the worst GM advice you can possibly give somebody. A lot of people say, just put the books away. Just if you don't remember a rule, just make it up. I don't really, I don't play that way. I like to have the books nearby. I'll make a lot of stuff up, but I also want to teach the game and learn the game myself. And so, the classic 3rd edition schmozzle that was grappling. We constantly were looking up grappling rules over and over and over again. It's like, okay, well, first you make a touch attack, and then there's a defense, and then you do something else, and then okay, at this point you've started a grapple, and then what do I roll and what do they roll to oppose? But after 4 or 5 times of looking it up at the table, we used it and we learned it. And so that kind of high speed learning, you don't
flow chart for everyone.
Yeah.
My personal pet peeve for 3rd edition was if you tried to shoot at an enemy that was adjacent to your allies, but you didn't have precise shot, but the enemy was large or larger. There was a rule that you didn't need precise shot, and we would always end up in that situation, and we'd find the rules, we'd never know what the page was, then we'd forget which page it was on, then the rule would come up, then we tried to look it up in the book again. Like we never learned. We never learned.
Yeah. I know Monty Cook games and their games, Numenera and The Strange and the Cipher system, they've got this excellent habit of that the books have wide margins, and in the margins they have links to similar rules. So if they're talking about using an asset, then there's a link to where assets are described right there. So you can just quickly go to, okay, well, page 287, you flip to that.
That's a great idea.
Yeah.
It's an amazing idea. Every book should be like that.
Yeah. It's kind of like trying to recreate hyperlinks in a paper format. Yeah. So you're playing this, you said offline that you're playing the City of Mist game. And
it's still online. It's just real time.
Oh, it's real time. Oh, okay. What do you miss?
Like we're playing using our roll d20 for the character sheets and the rolls, and through Zoom.
Zoom, okay. I've tried playing some online games a few years ago before I discovered Play by Post, and I had mixed results with it. I found it hard to talk. Maybe technology has improved. Zoom is certainly better than what we were using before, like Google Hangouts, but it would just never really be a good time to jump in. Things would cut out, and anyway. What do you miss from live gaming from online, do you think?
Probably the food.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're in my game where I was playing the mage, where that was like his thing about food, because he was like the cook of the 4-man bachelor pad where they were all living in a house. Everyone's a mage. But yeah, just in between sessions during in the breaks during the game, just getting food and just talking about life in general, socializing, I guess, real time.
Yeah, there's like that friendship component because largely, unless you're gaming at like even if you're gaming in a store or something, some of those people are your friends, right? And,
Yeah. I mean, also you get a chance to like have a reason to try making a strata or
yeah.
a different kind of cookie, steak, depending on what kind of game it is.
Yeah.
What were you saying? It's just really delicious. I'll take my turn in a minute.
Yeah. So the opposite then is when you're playing live, even on Roll20 or in Zoom, what do you miss about play by post that you don't get on that in that format?
Play by post obviously is a little bit slower than like a 2 or 4 hour session. During the week, like I had a 4 hour session face to face on Sundays, and then a 2 to 2.5 hour game like on Wednesday nights online. Different set of people, different game, but 2 games a week was like about it that you can go ahead and get schedule wise in, or if you're playing real time. You can't really play like in as many games as you can play by post because of, since it technically is slower, you have a little bit more wiggle room to go ahead and review and maintain a couple different games, which I should probably make some updates. Kind of bad on the weekends for that. But technically, when I had like an eye ulcer and I couldn't see out one eye, I don't think anyone really noticed on my activity level dropping on the site.
Yeah, it's true. I know playing live, one of the things I really miss in play by post is a deep immersion. Like when you get in, you're playing, and maybe you've put down the fork, and you're just deep into the game, and everybody's crafting the story together. You don't really get those kind of concentrated bursts of just immersion when you're on play by post, and you're reading. So that's one thing I miss.
Yeah. Of course, as a GM, like one thing that you probably miss from play by post and versus real time is you can only have so many bathroom breaks after somebody does something. Like,
Yeah.
I gotta use the bathroom real quick. I'll be right back. You're on your phone scrolling. This, you want to do this, I can work that this way into the story, that'll work, that won't work. Did not expect him to just try and run over the enemy with a car. You know what? I'll just do it real world. People record it, and now he can get arrested. Man, that's a little complicated. That'll be interesting.
Yeah.
I killed all the vampires. Yes, it's okay. I'm wanted by the cops now. They can't find the bodies. Very suspicious.
Yeah, there's this thing with play by post or in live gaming where you set up in a room, and then the players are like, I want to talk to the security guard, or I want to talk to the sales manager, and you're like, all right, I'll just create this NPC in my head on the real time, no problem.
Yeah.
And it can be less satisfying, and you just like throw in a stereotype, and it's like stereotypical security guard. And but in play by post, you've got the time to kind of craft and say, hey, I could use this opportunity to introduce something or bring something back to the focus.
Yeah,
because you can think about it. The first question I've got is, it's been like almost 2 years since we've really been kind of like locked in our houses periodically. And so my personal gaming is like live gaming has gone way down, almost to nothing. And how about you? Have you haven't really done a lot of face-to-face gaming?
I mean, getting out of college didn't help that either, because that was kind of like our, captive crew kind of deal. But yeah, nah, it hasn't been a lot. I've been grateful for, I've got a game going on Roll20, so you can at least hear people, which is nice.
Yeah.
But it's mostly play by post these days.
So what do you miss most about live gaming?
Table talk.
Yeah.
and having a clear end of session, because like there's this, you know, emotional curve that you get on, and you don't have to like try to maintain it on your breaks while you're busy doing other stuff day to day. And snacks.
Snacks.
I mean, I can have snacks while I'm doing play by post, but it's not the same.
Yeah. Yeah, we'd have like one group in particular, somebody would always bring a pie.
Ooh.
And so you just have like this hot, fresh pie in the middle of gaming, and yeah.
That's pretty good. Yeah. one of our players in a family group, so we got to play a little bit recently, but then I moved. He just started making D&D themed foods. He had this mushroom soup that was fantastic, and that was. I try not to be an easily bribed DM, but man, he made it hard.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of the things I miss, and you probably get a lot more of on Roll20, is body language, particularly when you're a game master, right? Being able to see the players' reactions.
We don't play with video.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're audio only. So yeah, no, I miss that too.
So at least you hear some reactions like, oh God, now I gotta roll initiative again.
There were at least 2 times in the session a couple days ago where you just kind of heard this chirping in the background while the PCs were trying to do something, and you realized it was the DM laughing at us. It was great.
Yeah.
So yeah, that all of the stuff that you can't really afford to do in play by post, I miss from live playing. But it's nice to have something.
Yeah. The other part you get from playing on Roll20 is the immediacy of having to engage right away, right?
Mhm.
So, and the immersion that comes with staying kind of engaged.
The maps are real nice too. Like I do not recommend setting up a map in Excel and then just sharing the link back and forth for play-by-post combat. Or if you do that, like try it first. Don't beta test with the game. Because it gets clunky. Like, I can't move my image. My image is stuck in a cell. It's like, okay, this is a mess. So the map function on Roll20 is real nice too.
When you played in college, did you have music going in the background?
Sometimes, yeah. Actually, there's I mean, because we were nerds, go figure. So there, now and then I'll hear something from an anime and it'll yank me back to whatever game it was because that's what the DM was watching at the time. So that's always a good time. There's a couple of songs that have become memes. But no, that was always good. And they had the place we played had a dimmer switch in the dining room, which was pretty swanky. Because when things got I mean, heck, one time we like lit candles and everything. And then we brought the lights down. It's like, I can't read my character sheet. We got to do less mood lighting. It was a good time.
Yeah, we used to do that for Earth Day. We would turn all the electronics and the lights off and just game by candlelight. But you really had to feel pity for the people who you write in pencil and lightly.
See, it's nice here if you've actually got the stomach to go back and read, 2,000 posts. There is already a catalog existing. Like I remember in college, I would be sitting there with my, oh, I didn't use this entire notebook for calculus last semester. And I'd be writing this awful shorthand, trying to take notes of what happened every session. And then I'd go back to it. I was here. I saw this happen. I have no idea what this is.
Yeah. Yeah.
In pencil. Foolish.
Yeah. So the opposite part of what do you miss in live gaming is what would you miss live gaming from play by post experience?
I really like being able to edit or to have the time to think about something before I say it in character. Especially when you've got a couple games going, or it's been even in live gaming, you've got a week in between sessions, right? If you're lucky. So being able to just take a minute, remember who I'm playing this time, edit for clarity. Because there were so many times where it's like, yeah, I've got this great character with a good charisma score, and I am not showing that at the table, but we're gonna try, dang it. And it's easier to I think the overall experience is more immersive in person, but I think the characters really benefit on play by post because you can treat it more like the story. So
Yeah. Yeah. Like the opposite of the immediacy and the immersion is being able to very carefully craft your tone and theme. So,
which gets tricky if you're in a fast-paced game and like everyone's online and you get 3 or 4 posts shot off in an hour and it's like, oh shoot, well they already posted and I was gonna post. Now we gotta decide who's gonna edit to make sure. But it works.
yeah. And you already mentioned the automatic note taking. There's always like at the beginning of a campaign at our table, somebody's like, so who's note taker this time? We always
Well,
have this one girl because she just takes wicked notes. Like she'll take 6 pages of notes in a session.
Well, and it's easier to keep things private as a game master too, with the note function. Like you pass a piece of paper to someone at a table, everybody knows something's up.
Yep.
But with play by post, I mean, if you're really that worried about it, if you're not using the note function in gamers playing, I mean, most of the games I'm in have a side Discord to handle out of character stuff because it's just easier. So that part's nice too.
Yeah. 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 And like clearly at the table, you can always like point at somebody and like, come on, we're going upstairs. And then you can have like some kind of private powwow with the GM and as they set up some kind of what turns out to be a pretty lame plot, but you can still do it.
We actually in a Roll20 is kind of that middle ground. My character did a very stupid thing. So the DM set me in a Discord room so that we could hash it out. But we were recording it to podcast it and like, oh shoot, now I still gotta talk about this in character because then it's just gonna be this awkward radio silence for like 5 minutes. So it's been really interesting trying to do this in different formats.
Yeah, that's true. Like go back to and people like Knife's Edge Games and I think Harrigan as well. And I, to a very lesser extent, tried play by email before there was even forums, right? And so you can't really meet with your friends all the time, or if you're like me, you can only meet with your friends 4 days a week. And so you still got 3 days to game, right? So you end up in these play by post games and, you would send off an email and prior to emails, it was letters. People would gather it all together and put out like the next move. And nerds will game any way we can, right?
I never got into chess by mail.
Yeah.
I'll pass on that one.
Yeah. Comparing live gaming to play-by-post gaming. And one of the things I know I miss in play-by-post is that in a live game, you can see the player's engagement visibly immediately. Like, you know, if something's getting their attention, you know, if something's turning them away, you know, if they're, you know, leveling up their Star Wars game on their phone, or if they're starting a conversation with somebody else because they're so unattached to the current scene. But in play by post, you just don't have that secondary meta level response.
Yeah, there's no real immediate feedback loop there. And I've run into problems with that myself, because there's a lot of time, especially I am a puzzle person. I love puzzles. I will sit down with puzzles for hours and try to solve them. But not everybody is that way. And so sometimes I will put a puzzle into a game without even really realizing that I put it in there. It was just an interesting thought to me. And so I'm like, well, this was interesting. I'm going to see what the players do with it. And they have no clue, because they don't have the same train of thought that I had when I thought it was an interesting idea. And it takes a while before I realize that, hey, maybe this is not actually going the way I wanted it to go, and I should change it. So I've kind of had to stay away from puzzles for that reason, because I can't ever tell when something is going the way that I want it to go. But on the other hand, I do not miss having to come up with split-second replies to really off-the-wall character actions. I like in play by post, if somebody's doing something that I'm not expecting them to do, I can sit there and take an hour and figure out exactly how I want to respond to it, instead of needing to have a response in 1-2 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah, that's for sure. Like, that's a huge strength, is just being able to, when you're GMing a live game, you can leave the room and, go refill your drink or use the bathroom or something, and take a moment to compose yourself as your plot lies in smoking ruins after the players found out the secret button that bypasses everything. But in play by post, that's just built in, right? If you take a day or an hour, nobody really knows that you're pulling your hair out.
Yeah, the biggest thing I've got to watch, especially here recently, because we've had so many changes that started because of COVID, and now that stuff has changed and they're trying to get everything back on track, there's even more changes that are coming down the pipeline at my job. And so there are days when I can just sit down and I can type out everything I want to, and I'm good, and I get through all my games and I'm caught up and I'm just waiting, and I've got this urge to start another game. And then there's the next day where I have no time at all, and I might be able to make one post, and I realize maybe I shouldn't start a game yet. But normally the extra time is a bonus, because there's a lot of times when in a live game I can give a description of something, or I can give the dialogue for something, but there's not really a lot of depth in it sometimes, because you can't plan for everything. And so you may have this very evocative description of this place that you're expecting the players to go, and then they decide that they're not going to do anything with it. And then they want to go off into this other place that you thought that you're really, after they've decided to go there, you're really sorry that you actually mentioned it, because you really didn't have anything to do with it. You just mentioning it because it was part of the setting and it made sense for it to be there. And now all of a sudden they're wanting to spend 2 hours there, and you've given it a 3-word description, but with play by post, you can sit down and you can say, okay, well, I'm going to describe this a little bit better. You can backspace and get the wording exactly right if you need to. And it's a little bit easier that way. So I've actually come to enjoy play by post a lot more than in-person gaming because of that. Not that I wouldn't do an in-person game if the opportunity arose, but like I like being able to play with words, and I like being able to what's the term I'm looking for? Can't think of it, but I like being able to do unexpected things with the English language sometimes.
Yeah.
And that takes a little bit of work. It's not something that always rolls off the tip of my tongue. So, as you can tell, I have difficulties with English sometimes.
Everybody does. Yeah, you're right. Like, that's an interesting side effect, like a mini level meta thing about play-by-post is that you're writing, you're crafting, and the what you're putting down on the paper, you can, you know, mold into a certain way so it has a certain poetic feel, or really nails the tone that you want for a scene, where it's much harder to do that spontaneously in live play, especially if the players are off script, which is 90% of the time.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think I've ever had a game stay on script that I wanted it to. I've never ended a game with the same end point that I planned when I started it.
Yeah, I've done that with Vampire. Because it's such an intense political game, you need NPCs that have strong motivations and definite goals, right? And quite a few NPCs. And so I'll craft what I think is the plot of the game. And then I'll get halfway through and I'll be going back through my notes and I'm like, I didn't do any of this. And like, this would just have radically changed everything.
Yeah. I've been responsible for that from the other end though before. Of course, probably the worst one, we just really didn't. We had all decided that we were going to take turns GMing, and so we decided that we would, you know, we would all come up with a story and we'd run the story, and then we'd hop out and somebody else would pull their character in and we'd do another story. And there was one guy who his idea of GMing was basically to punish the players as much as possible. He thought that was the whole point, apparently. And so we really did not want to continue this game. He wasn't part of our core group. And there was just a lot of bad attitudes starting to go around the table in general. And so, long story short, we were running away from this warlord, and we were trying to run to a city that was supposed to be safe from them. But because that wasn't the GM's plan for us, he decided to have a fire giant chase us. He wasn't doing anything to us. He was just going to track us back to the city so the city would no longer be safe, so that the warlord would know where the city was. And so we decided between three of us that we were going to just get rid of this in a manner that we couldn't, that nobody could argue with. So one night when we camped, set an extended, and I can't remember all the details of the actual spells that were involved, but we set an extended illusion over the camp, and then there was a spell called Pin the Soul, I think is what it was called, and you could cast it on the gem, and whoever picked up the gem would then be trapped inside the gem. And so we cast that and left a huge ruby in the middle of the camp, and we all crawled out of the camp. So the next morning, the fire giant comes along, looking around, picks through the camp, nobody's there, sees the ruby, picks it up, he's gone. And that was the end of that campaign. So I have been guilty of doing it from the other side too, but in all fairness, I think everybody wanted that campaign to end.
So what do you miss from live gaming when you're playing on play-by-post?
So that's an important question to me, right? Because I switched in the mid-90s. If people watched the first video that we did, I switched to fully play-by-post for like more than 20 years, right? So I was pretty acutely aware of what I wasn't getting right away. It's the stuff that other folks, I'm sure, will tell you. It's the camaraderie at the table, the social part of it, right? Being able to read body language and facial expressions and all that sort of stuff. There's obviously an immediacy and a speed that comes from playing either in a live at the table or these days virtually, right? I think there are certain games that just play better live, especially those ones that have bidding, that have cards, that have meta currencies that are supposed to flow back and forth quickly. As we talked about, 6 months ago or 9 months ago, whatever the hell it was now, those transactions will kill a game, and sometimes those transactions are really fun in certain types of role-playing games where you have people who are competing. Fate Points is a great one where the player can decide to have a better result, and then the GM can say, well, I'm going to put my fate point in, and so you have to keep kind of bidding up and up. That doesn't work so great, right? So there are certain types of games that I think you don't really get to dive into, and they may be stuff that has lots of really cool stuff for the table as well, maps and tokens and all that kind of stuff too. I think that humor doesn't come across as well in play-by-post always. It can be harder to write funny and to write in a way that's not ham-handed and not kind of over the top, as opposed to having that camaraderie at the table where people kind of get to know each other and all that sort of stuff. Then there's always like, you don't get to have pizza and beer with folks kind of, before and after the game. I always like when I play live these days virtually, we almost always do like okay, now the game is over. And we spend between half an hour and 2 hours afterwards going through, especially if we finished like a 5 or 10 session sort of mini campaign, we'll break it down. And that stuff's really fun too. And it can, play by post is definitely more impersonal, especially until you get to know the people you're playing with. And I think that you and some other folks on Gamers Plane really have started to see over the last few years, some connections are forming. You're playing with the same people over and over again. And I think it becomes more like a live table because you start to get to know people. So,
yeah. Yeah, there's some advantages to live gaming. For example, have you ever played Dread? With the
no, but I know all about it. Yeah,
right. So there's this Jenga table, and
can't do that.
in certain parts of the game, you have to draw from the table, and then when the table collapses, the plot is resolved. And so that's very unsatisfying in play-by-post, I would think.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm getting at. Is there are certain mechanics that just can't and won't translate, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and users of the Gamers Plane Discord will recognize your what's been becoming known as Harrigan transactions.
Yeah,
after your first, but it's a brilliant insight, and just the word of transaction is exactly right in that every time you got to go back and forth in play-by-post just to clarify something or to up a bid, that can be days or hours.
Yeah, once you become conscious of it, and you're trying to bring a new game to the table, you can see it if you go through the rules carefully. The example I almost always point to, maybe I even did last time, is Masks, which is a Powered by the Apocalypse game. So in other words, narrative, lightweight, pretty simple mechanics, right? A lot of player-facing mechanics, but it has one mechanic in it that is brutal in play-by-post, and that is team, which is when someone is trying something and they roll a 2d6 and they get either a partial or a failure result, everyone else at the table can say, I'd like to spend team. So I've seen tons of games where the GM goes, they got a 6. Does anyone want to spend team? Rob, do you want to spend? Dave, do you want to spend? Leslie, do you want to spend? And it just bogs everything down because they're waiting to be able to narrate the result of that based on what every other player at the table does. So that, even though the game itself flows very smooth, there's this one piece that's like, and you've seen it in your games. Any game that has pace can overcome all those transactions. If people are posting a couple times a day, the transactions don't matter that much because people are always in there. But it can matter a lot if people are posting like twice a week, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So the counter question then for what you miss, have you played live games very much in the last? And if you went back to a live game, what would you miss at that table that you get in play-by-post?
Yeah, so 2019 is when I decided some other things were going on in my life, and I decided to sort of trim some hobbies and focus on role playing. I think we've all got the gamut of nerddom hobbies, right? A lot of us, whether it's board games, movies, science fiction novels, you name it, all the different things out there that you see on the Discord, how many different channels we have for different things to talk about all around kind of the nerd hobby, right? So I decided to focus in on RPGs and went from exclusively playing play-by-post. I'm like, I'm going to figure out how to play live again, even though I don't have a group. So I started going to a couple local cons, found a team, long story short, found a few people to play with locally. So played at cons with them, then kind of joined they have like a gaming network in the Colorado area where I am called Janus. So I started playing with the Janus group. that translated into a couple of like there's a podcast that I'm pretty involved with called Gaming and BS, where I know those guys pretty well, and we've started up a number of live games with a lot of the fans and the listeners of that show. So I've played a lot live since 2019, probably once a week or up to about 5 times a month is what I'm playing. So I went from not playing at all to playing a lot. So there are definitely things, and as I said last time when we chatted, I actually, if you had to take one of them away from me, I'm going to give up live gaming because I like the play-by-post format so much. But I love live gaming too. It would be a very difficult decision. But I'm sure you'll hear this from other folks, and I wonder if this is part of your overall thesis, but it's pretty simple. It's depth of story. It's the characterization you can get. People are often, at least the people that I work with and play with and myself, I'm a better writer, I think, than I am an actor, right? So I'm not as good at getting into character, staying in character, conveying emotion, especially in those scenes that are a little more adult or mature or heartfelt or terrified or whatever. One thing that live tables often do, I've noticed, especially if you're playing con games or one shots or people you don't know, is everything gravitates towards like a Monty Python vibe, right? Everything goes right down to this really fun, but kind of goofy, kind of little off the hook, kind of gonzo kind of stuff. And so tone can be hard to maintain unless you know the table really well. Tone can be pretty easy to maintain in play-by-post because everybody's more into a kind of a narrative mindset, more of a storytelling mindset, that kind of thing. I think you mentioned this actually in one of the earlier Gamers Playing videos. The ease of looking up rules is awesome in play-by-post. So you can actually play pretty mechanically dense games, especially if they're not transaction heavy, and not worry about it because if someone gets back to you, you have 30 minutes, an hour a day to look up all the rules you need to. So that part's pretty great as well. I love being able to tell more complex and longer stories because you can always go back to the catalog, to the library of all your chapters and see, what were the NPCs' names, what was the clue that got dropped and all that kind of stuff. So you can always go back and do that. And I also think that, especially for certain types of play-by-post games, you're attracting a certain type of player. So people who are generally more interested in story, more interested in the characters, that kind of thing. And I think when you play in real life, you get a wide open range of people who might come to the table who have different needs they're trying to fulfill. And some of them are totally that beer and pretzels, chuck dice and kill monsters kind of stuff, which is also cool and what you can do in play-by-post. But play-by-post, I think, tends to, it opens up this other sort of angle and it attracts a certain type of player, I guess is what I would say. So there's lots of pieces I miss, but I kind of love both. I love the social stuff, but I also love the depth of character exploration and characterization and all that stuff. What's your thesis?
Yeah, so my thesis is, I think, a complex, and part of it is the opposite of what you just said, because I'm a contrarian.
Go for it.
So, what do I miss from play-by-post in real life games? All of the things you said are definitely things you miss when you're at the table. What do I miss from in live gaming in play-by-post? One of the things I really thrive on is the pressure cooker, right? As a GM, as somebody who GMs by the seat of my pants, play-by-post gives me that opportunity to push decisions off for future Rob to make, right? I can, and this can be as extreme as I call the players to roll initiative. I have no idea what they're fighting yet. It doesn't matter, right? It is not a problem. That's not a problem for current Rob.
You mean you're talking play-by-post right now?
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Yep.
And so vice versa, when you're when you're in live games, you've got this immediacy, right? You have this, you need to have all of these things ready. And I'm pretty good at making snap decisions and making snap decisions that follow my plot. And so part of me really likes that, that pressure cooker, that having to make up the story as we go along right then and there.
So you're talking pressure on you, the GM.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And see, I don't disagree, but I also look at it the other way in that I also like really putting pressure on players in real time. So in fact, forcing hard decisions is like a mantra of mine, at least especially in live gaming, where there's basically a left or right, neither is good. Make the decision and live with the consequences, kind of thing. Especially if I'm going down more of an OSR kind of, it's a that type of gaming. Yeah, that's interesting, because the fact that play by post, even the rapidly running play by post stuff, is slow enough that you're right. You don't have to worry about it. You can kind of go really seat of the pants and just come up with something in the moment, right? You can, but it's less pressure on you to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I buy it.
So then because of that, putting that pressure on myself as a GM, I have to give myself the tools to succeed, right? Which means better preparation in advance, particularly for plot lines and NPC storylines. Theoretically, in play-by-post, I've got all the time in the world to think about that. And I do, like when I'm doing other stuff, like, doing accounting or something at work, my part of my brain is running through these scenarios and trying to think what would be a great, arc for these characters. And so it does happen, but by having these concrete deadlines, like, okay, well, at 6 o'clock, they come over, we're going to sit at the table, we're going to chit chat for half an hour, then we got to go. And I have to make sure we're all entertained and paced for the next 6 hours. So you need to have the material and the tools to do that.
I am curious to see, when you talk to a wide range of people from Gamers Plane, if that turns out to be a crawl problem or not. If you don't set a deadline, because I see exactly what you're getting at, is that you don't prep because you don't have to, and that leads to some, maybe, I don't know if it's suboptimal, but some outcomes that you haven't maybe put the thought into it that you would for a live game, because you have that deadline looming and whatnot, right? Yeah, I don't know. I don't tend to have this. I don't tend to struggle with that. I'm like you. I think actually many people probably on Gamers Plane who are hardcore gamers, this crap's in my head all the time, all day long. So when I got to a point where technology could let me capture all my thoughts in real time, I was able to dispense with the notebooks I was carrying while I was traveling on planes and the voice recorders I would have, so I didn't lose the thought, right? I switched to I use Evernote, but the equivalent is OneNote or Notion or any of these sort of cloud-based note-taking tools, which let you access your thought power anywhere, and everything like cleared up for me in terms of what you're talking about, which is you have this stray thought, and whether it's about live gaming or play-by-post, you can capture it at any time. And then, right before, do a little bit of prep, you can kind of noodle on it. But I keep detailed notes on every play-by-post game that I run, specifically with like what's ahead for this character, for the players in my games, type of thing. Same way that I would for live game. I kind of treat them the same way almost. Maybe it would be different if you didn't play in and run 200 games.
It could be, yeah. And that actually is true. I use Google Docs for most of my live note taking, because you can use my phone, you can use my work computer, whatever. And
that's the point, yeah.
And
you back?
Yep. Yeah.
I'm not sure. Don't think it was me. Zoom just kind of crashed there. So okay.
Yeah. Anyway, so I've got these endless docs, and a lot of them are Gamers Plane notes, and so the detailed notes, like you said, plots, notes of what's happened to keep myself in order to change the plot as it evolves, and that sort of. And now what I stopped using Google Docs, and I started just using GMPCs, because then it's a text-based editor right within the game itself. I can just click on the GMPC and all of my notes are buried just right there. And again, Gamers Plane is accessible on my phone, where I take most of my notes. So
when you say GMPC, you are literally setting up a character in the game as the GM, and then on their profile or something, where are you capturing the notes?
So if you use even if it's a Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition game, you've got a character sheet, and the character sheet's name is Dungeon Master.
Yep.
Then in the notes section or in the spell section or anywhere, any of the text box that are below there, you can just type whatever you want, right? I use that.
Then just don't share the character. I got you. Don't.
So you could create you can even, you've got an avatar, and then it's, you know, you're maybe,
I'm with you.
yeah. So I'm
That's
always,
cool.
so I'm always posting my game not as Crawlock, but as this GM PC, and it's just the GM. It's a, you know, like the dungeon master from the old cartoon.
One thing I've started doing, almost like an experiment, is in the zombie game I'm running right now. I'm from time to time when I start a scene, I will write a private message to myself at the front of a scene, like, "This is what you were thinking, Harrigan." You know, if things go, you know, way off the rails, that's the kind of game that is very player driven in terms of where they go, right, and what they do. So if I got 3 or 4 or 5 what I think are decent ideas, I kind of populate them at the front of the thread, hide it in a PM to myself, and then off we go. Similar to what you're talking about, but I think you have a lot more structure to what you're doing.
Yeah, and it's just something I found that the easiest thing to do in a game is when you're looking at the thread is click in your own avatar, and then it brings up all your notes. Just one click and you're done.
Yep. So let me ask you this then, for your thesis about how deadlines and prep force kind of a different crawler to come to the table as the GM. Do you like prep? Do you enjoy that kind of lonely fun part of the RPG hobby?
No, I don't like writing it down. I like thinking about it. I love noodling about the ideas, and luckily, you know, as I get older, I have to take more and more notes, perhaps. But my brain just kind of stores all this stuff. So playing in, you know, running a dozen games simultaneously isn't really an issue to keep all that stuff straight in my head. Especially on play-by-post, where you've got time to think about, okay, what was I really trying to go for this thing? You think back to your thoughts on that and put it all down.
Right.
So
I go back.
I think my thesis to your question, though, isn't that one of the advantages of live gaming is that pressure cooker, and it does create it's a different emotional experience at the table. If you're really prepared for everything the players are going to do, you can still have fun, and you can focus more on the moment because you're not constantly trying to think about what comes next. You can be more involved, but at the same token, having to rapidly think is its own kind of endorphin release.
Yeah, and maybe that's part of why, in the end, I probably prefer play-by-post, because while I like that in the moment, seat of the pants kind of stuff, and in fact, that's how I GM live as well, is I prep pretty lightly and then kind of, you know, roll with things. In the end, I often have a feeling when I'm done, I could have done that better. We could have done this different. I could have done this instead. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that the game is just rolling, right? It's just heading in this other direction. I'm like, I can't believe I forgot to have that NPC show up. You know, that there's that kind of thing. And that rarely happens in play-by-post. Maybe it's a control freak thing. I don't know.
Yeah, for sure. Like that's a huge problem with seat of your pants GMing, is that if you get really involved in what the character is doing and you're excited with what they're doing and you're going along with it and whatnot, then all of a sudden you're like, oh, I had this huge plot monster was plotting towards Bethlehem, and I just completely forgot to set that up.
It happens.
I totally do.
So have you been playing live games in the last 2 years?
I have. I've managed to find a group through my library here, and we've run a few things. I ran a short-lived Exalted game that was okay. We had some player issues on that one. Some D&D, 5th Ed. We tried to play the Dragon Age game, and we got like one session in, and it fell apart. And then I ran a Hunter the Vigil 2nd edition game. Well, it was a Chronicles 2nd edition, and then we migrated to Hunter from there, because I've been backing like the Kickstarters lately, and so whenever they release the manuscript, I'm like, let's play. And then we muddle through their like disorganized manuscript that's not laid out and doesn't have the tables or anything. You're just trying to do the best you can with what you got.
Yeah, I remember playtesting Vampire 5th edition, and the rules
Was that on GP? I played a
Yeah.
I played a playtest of 5th Ed. I think we were in the same game. Yeah.
yeah, that was probably me running it, set in Germany, and
Yeah, that was it. That was
it
it.
was
Yeah.
it was awful. Like their scenario, the rule set, all of it, just none of it made
Yeah.
for easy sailing.
Because it was only like a portion of the rule. It like only had like the combat rules, I think, right? And
Right.
even then it was dumbed down. It wasn't great.
Yeah.
Although I'm in a 5th Ed game now on GP that it just well, no. Okay, we're just getting it started. But I'm hoping to get a better taste of what 5th edition has to offer. I like the hunger dice mechanic. I think that's very clever.
I do as well. Yeah, for sure. It brings back that hunger that kind of went away from 1st and 2nd edition.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
3rd and 4th, it just kind of vanished almost as being a problem.
Yeah, I mean, it was only a problem if you like chose to make it part of the story, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. So when you're playing live games and play-by-post games simultaneously, what do you miss from live games when you're playing online?
I'd say with live games, you get a lot more spontaneity. You know, I'm not great at prep, so I end up just kind of coming up with a lot of things on the fly, and stories end up going places I don't expect. And you also get a lot more, for better or worse, you get a lot more table talk, and just kind of fun moments, right? But on the flip side, with play-by-post, one of the things I love is that you have a minute to think about it, you know, and you can, especially as the GM, you have the opportunity to like, A, get your rules right, but then B, like, take nuance into account and go back, you know, 3 pages of posts and go like, what did I say? I remember I dropped a hint over there. I don't want to lose that. And so I feel like I have a more cohesive, I'm able to put together a more cohesive story, or guide a better story on play-by-post.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think the spontaneity at a live table is something I do miss in play-by-post. I was saying this on the weekend to somebody else that playing GMing live on the seat of your pants, like if you're a low prep GM like yourself and like I am, there's this pressure cooker, right? There's this, you know, this excitement that you have to come up with something now, and your brain responds, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I enjoy that, being on the edge and having to guide a good story on the seat of your pants.
Yeah.
But it, like you said, it doesn't allow for the depth of story that you can tell on play-by-post by carefully crafting things.
Yeah. And to your point, like, I enjoy that. I like, it energizes me, and I find fun moments there, but it's also draining. Like, yeah. I'll get out of a game session, I'll be like, I need a nap. I'm tired, maybe because I'm old. But yeah, it takes a lot of energy mentally for me to run games like that. And then I get like anxiety before running sessions, because I'm like, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know, is this going to be good? Is this going to be bad? I don't, you know, I don't know.
No, I get that too, like, especially when, you know, a half dozen people show up in your house and, okay, we're going to start gaming at 6. We'll probably game till like 1 a.m. And you're like, I've got nothing, right? You know, I was planning on doing some prep today, but I wasn't in the mood, and now I'm
100%.
not entirely in the mood, and now I got to entertain these people for 7 hours. And
Yeah.
usually it worked out, but
or you'll get into like halfway through that session and you've run out of stuff and you're like, oh man, I had like 3 scenes. I had 3 scenes ready. Like, you blew through them.
Yeah, so one of the questions I've got about play by post is what do you miss largely when you're in a play by post game that you would get at a live game that simply is impossible?
Okay, well, apart from I think the most obvious is, as usual, the social interaction. It is okay at a live game to get up, walk away from the table, have a drink, crack jokes on the side until the DM says, "Stop it! Can you please focus on what's going on the table?" I mean, that sort of thing is necessary. Again, admittedly and embarrassingly, I've compartmentalized the two. So in social situations, with your friends or with your gang, or if in those occasions you expect the socialness. I think in PBP I've stopped expecting that, and you can have your OOC chat, of course, but there's I mean, when we do chat, that's treated like text messages. I think people are used to, if we need to chat, used to chatting on a WhatsApp platform, on a Discord platform. So GP shouldn't be too different, I think, if we were so inclined to chat, right? Otherwise, the table is what else? The tactile bits, of course, right? Rolling dice. Everybody loves rolling dice, right? Yeah, you missed that. Miniatures, not so much. You can still get your fix, I guess. You can get a wargaming fix. You may not need to, have a map, right? Theater of the mind is fine. So those are main in real life bits, I think, compared to gamers playing. Let me flip that question, since I think that's going to be the obvious next question, or to think about. I think PBP favors people who, again, we have to admit this, favors people who like to write, because some people are great speakers, right? They're able to describe, right, face to face. They can ad lib. People can jump in on each other's declarations of actions, right? If somebody's going to interrupt and say, wait, are you sure you're going to say that? Then, somebody's going to come in and say, yeah, wait, all right, I'll change what I'm going to declare next. That's part of the real life that, of course, PBP doesn't have. What you do have from PBP is, I think, more careful crafting. I think that's pretty obvious, right? You think about what you want to write. You try to make your posts a little longer, right? You don't get little interjections. You don't get bits of conversation, right? You get a more thoughtful or more well-considered paragraph, I think. Yeah, and pros and cons of that, I suppose. Yeah.
Yeah, I wonder too if for those of us that are well versed in both media, if that is bleeding back and forth, and in live games that we are picking up any habits that we might have learned from play by post and vice versa. Vice versa is probably the easiest one. Like, we in fact interpret live play into play by post and kind of have to forget some bad habits and learn some new ones.
Yeah.
Does it go the other way, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, on the first point first, you're right. I had to unlearn a couple of things, right? Switching over to post. You tell yourself at the start, all right, these are things I have to give up, right? I can't do certain things that I always used to do at a table. Yeah, so you can't make an announcement, for example, and expect everybody to be able to act straight away. You can't. If you want to call for a die roll, you want to call it early and give enough warning or enough reminder for why you need that die roll, right? You can't do spontaneity in that sense, right? You can't say, okay, well, tell you what, roll your die now. That's not going to work. So that bleeds very much into adventure design, I think, right? What kind of games you can play on PBP. So again, for people who have played both, you tend to give up on certain styles, I suppose, or certain approaches to in PBP that you would, you'd rather run in real life, or at least real life with a live stream perhaps might help. right? Something on Twitch, something on, well, I know some people have tried to do some Zoom as well, or anything that lets everybody log in at the same time, with the camera. That solves some of the issues. But if you're remaining just gamers playing alone, then you just have to deal with the fact that, yeah, it's just literally all text. It is part of one of the things, and I found it easy, but one of the things you're trying to do is tell a story together or write a story together. Essentially, once everybody understands that's what gamers playing allows you to do, I think with that understanding, will fit in quite fine to PBP.
Yeah, I think for some players, and there's many different kinds of players, of course. Some of them really just want to drop the dice. They want to be there with their friends. They want to hear the story and spend time and that sort of thing. But you really have to tease out background details from them and participation.
Right.
Whereas in play-by-post, those people are fewer, I think, than they are in live, because by the very nature, you're just given the microphone,
right,
a blank page, and you have to fill it. And so your thoughts and your character's description and actions just become more required, I think.
Yeah, I think again, both from the player as well as the GM, because it's all description, you feel that, or at least I feel that every sentence counts, right? Because your players are going to pore over, and they have time to pore over, right? The paragraph or the paragraphs that you've written in your post. Yeah, they're not just looking for the bit where they jump in. They might be reading into, and you don't know if they are. Well, they can get used to you, which is great. But before that, they don't know whether you are trying to emphasize something or de-emphasize something, right? If you tell them there's a forest, there's a stream, there's a lake, depending on how much you want to describe that stream or lake. Well, I suppose that's a bit like real life, I suppose, gaming. But if you say there's a stream or lake, but you describe the lake too beautifully, they may want to investigate the lake. Or if you did want them to investigate the lake, then you would put more description on that. That part's not so different, but the words you use in a post, that makes a difference, I think, because your players are going to read. They are going to go, okay, should I be paying attention to what the description is here, or should I just pay attention to what the action is here or somewhere else? I think that's crucial.
Yeah,
very much.
Yeah, and it's particularly when you're dealing with a time zone issue, it's important to be complete, right? And go through your posts and make sure that nothing obvious is going to be left out, like, oh, is the door locked, or that sort of things that the players might just have to know in order to craft their post. And so,
well, otherwise you just have to be a bit more patient, right? That's a bit more going back and forth. I think that's the other interesting thing. Again, an advantage or disadvantage with play by post. You want to have expectations with your players about how long you imagine this game to be. Long, and I don't mean, is it a 2-year commitment? Is it a 1-year commitment? It's also about posting rate. Are we imagining once a day, or we are expecting a hyper fast game, right? One fun thing I've seen, I cannot commit to, but one fun thing I've seen is let's have weekend games. I've just recently read a couple of those. In other words, nice concentrated number of hours just posting back and forth. I think knowing the expectations for that really helps players manage whether they can afford to go back and forth in their posts, right? Is the door locked? Yes, it is. If you're not rushing through a game, that's fine, right? But if you were running something where the rest of the players care that posts come more frequently, then that slows the game down, right? That makes game lag. Because
you joined the site earlier this year, and I think you were saying that you really became quite more or less active in May. And then you jumped on, you're one of my first interviews when I did this in season 1. And at that time you were still quite new. What do you think you've learned from, this wasn't in my preparation notes, but it suddenly occurs to me. What do you think you've learned about gaming and play-by-post gaming since our last talk?
I think that patience is a virtue, obviously. also careful not to get involved in too many games, because yeah, you're the exception of the rule. I mean, usually you want to have more of active playing, so you keep joining games, and then suddenly you're overwhelmed. But I think I'm having some quite good GMs that are keeping a pace. I mean, probably I wouldn't be able to keep up with a Weekenders game. So yeah, but it happens, you know.
I don't recall you had gamed some in real life. I think you had joined a friend's game originally. And
Quite little actually, but
Yeah.
yeah.
what do you miss from that experience that you don't see or don't find in play by post?
It's a bit of a double-edged knife actually, because it's, you know, the getting around, all the getting together and having each other's company and making jokes, etc. in real time, but at the same time it can prolong the session without actually playing really. I mean, it was like usually we had like 8 to 12 hours together with a couple hours playing, of actual playing, because someone would be late. Then I mean, for me, that's why I like play by post, because I'm not well, don't know all the rules already. I'm not playing for years as others, so I have the time to study my moves and plan them, while in a real life table I would be like, oh, what should I do, what can I do, and everybody would be waiting, and this can be a bit, I mean, when you're playing with friends, there's usually some understanding in that field, but especially with people that have been playing with strangers, it can be a bit more challenging.
Yeah, I was talking.
That's why I've been loving play by post, because I do have the time to learn as I play.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a real strength of play by post. For me, it isn't as much that element so much as being able to squeeze gaming into 5-minute chunks throughout the day rather than having to dedicate 8 to 12 hours of a otherwise busy life. And everybody's schedules are so hectic. It's just, okay, so we're gaming once a month then is all you can really manage, right?
Yeah.
I'm gaming, running a game of Supernatural, so based upon the TV show Supernatural, this evening actually. So that's probably the first time in like 2 months we've gotten together. Of course, COVID makes things always, rules change, and for a while we weren't even allowed to have people in our house. It was just against the law.
It was a bit not quite outlawed really, but it was advised against. And I mean, it had a basis, but I'd rather not discuss COVID at the moment.
So if you went back to live gaming, I guess you already answered this. What you most from play by post is the ability to really kind of craft your next action, take the time to learn what you need.
Yes, I mean, there are posts I've written that are quite descriptive, or they're usually more spontaneous, actually, not quite planning speeches, etc. But I'm not the type that has constantly inspiration to write. So that's a plus for me, having the time to get inspired to write.
Yeah, that's a good point. I know, like I've been at the table and the GM surprised you with a question, and you just kind of like, I need to think about this for a while. But when it's a live game, you just don't have that time to really get into the right mood. So
Yeah, and taking a break would be taking a while to get back into the same mood that you had before.
yeah.
Also,
So
there are other conveniences like notes being passed around, and this really cool feature, the private feature that's been integrated now, when everyone is reading the same thing, well, or at least they think they're reading the same thing, but it could be reading something entirely different.
yeah,
It's a thing that you can't do in real life. I mean,
yeah, there's some great features of play-by-post that you simply just cannot duplicate in real life without splitting the GM into multiple pieces, or sometimes even the players.
yeah, possibly.
Yeah.
Or having them isolated in a room by themselves and the GM going from one room to the next or
Yeah.
something like that. I don't know.
I know I was in one game where they wanted to run it with two GMs, so a live D&D game. And what they really wanted to do is have one GM running one game in one room, and then another GM in another room. And at certain points, they would send players from the first room to the second room to do things. And that's second, I don't know what they were planning, but
I've read actually things similar to what you're saying that have been going on here as well, not in Crete, but in Athens, obviously. I mean, even some type of gatherings that have been like half a dozen DMs with half a dozen groups ending up merging together, either being opposite sides or allying on the spot.
Yep. I think there's a castle in Poland that they rent out every year, and they run like this Harry Potter game. So it's like Hogwarts, and there's like 20 or 30 GMs throughout the castle, and people just show up and they play, and there might be hundreds of players, and they go around and essentially they're pretending to be students in Hogwarts, and things go on in different parts of the castle, different times. And
So pretty much big scale LARPing.
yeah.
Yeah, I've been a supernatural fan myself when my wife introduced me to it, guilty as charged. And I remember the term LARP from this episode that they had.
That's right. They show up at a haunted house, and they're actually a whole bunch of Sam and Dean Winchester fans. They all have shown up to.
No, it was, I mean, I think.
Well, the one with Felicia Day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That one.
Yeah. Play-by-post and live games. You're deeply involved in both of those, obviously, simultaneously. What do you miss from your live games when you're in a play-by-post game?
I think I miss the camaraderie. There is a certain camaraderie there, of course, but it's not like you can hold the game for a moment, tell a joke, or tell a funny story, or an anecdote. It has to be done as an out of character aside, and that kind of breaks the moment.
Right. Yeah, the camaraderie. That's it's hard to duplicate. Sometimes maybe with Discord, it gets a little better. Like if you have an out of character channel and people are just chatting back and forth, but that's not the same.
No, it's not. It's a different mechanic.
Just going to take notes here.
Okay.
So what about vice versa? When you're in a play-by-post in a live game, is there anything you miss from your play-by-post games?
Yes, the ability to think about my responses. In a play-by-post, I'll typically take at least 15 minutes to an hour to make a response, especially if I'm GMing. It may take me an hour or two to formulate a response. Whereas in real life games, it's quick.
Yeah. Yeah, I was saying this in the fall in a different video that quick is something I do miss too in play-by-post, because sometimes you can overthink things, maybe.
You can. I've run into that.
But there's also like this kind of almost an adrenaline rush for thinking on the fly, filling in details, and creating, especially when it works, and creating new things just very, very quickly, which you don't get in play-by-post. I mean, you could, but in the live, it's just
I see where you're going there.
Yeah.
It's that's one thing you do miss in play-by-post is the on you fly by the seat of your pants gaming.
Yeah. With play-by-post gaming, you have all the time in the world to look up a rule.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So you can play really complex games that you haven't memorized. Right. For example, you could be playing GURPS or something and just really maybe there's like an obscure rule that you just can't remember. And so at the table, maybe you find one of the 30 books you've got where that rule is referenced, or you just skip it and move on. But in play-by-post, you clearly can look everything up. However, there seems to be a larger and larger movement in play-by-post to simpler games and less rule-intensive games. Do you find that?
I've noticed that. I've noticed that a lot of people are turning towards the OSR clones that are much less complex than some of the modern games are, and even in D&D you see that. 5th edition is so much. I don't want to say dumbed down. I want to feel nicer than that, but it's such a drastic change from 3.5.
Yeah. Yeah, I think with D&D 5th edition, the rule book is still thick, but it's much more harmonized, right? The rules are all quite similar. And where in AD&D, sometimes you had to roll below a number, sometimes you had to roll above, and you had to kind of know a lot of things in order to play the game. It really.
Yeah, I used to have the page numbers memorized for the DM's guy.
Yeah. Yeah, and in 3.5, things like grappling or sundering weapons, that sort of thing, definitely I could just open up the player's book, flip right to it, because I reference that page so often, right? Because it didn't really make a lot of sense. It didn't make so much sense that it would just intuitively know it. So I'd have to look it up periodically. He's like, okay, first there's a touch attack, and then there's an opposed check, and then now they've initiated the grapple, but they're not pinned, so you have to wait till the next round to initiate a pin. And it's like this flow chart, right?
Whereas with the old games, I think you get a lot of here's the situation, you come up with the rule.
Yeah. Yeah, and Harrigan describes that as, I think, rulings before rules, right? Here's some basic mechanics. Do what you want with them. We're not going to explain everything.
Like I don't know anybody who actually used the grappling tables for AD&D. Almost everyone I know, it was just a simple make an attack roll, and if you succeed, you grab him.
Yeah.
I can't think of anybody I know who actually sat down and worked out the grappling mechanics.
I think I did exactly once, and it was in a game where the Crawlock persona was actually an NPC. This is where the campaign was running where that name first came up, actually. One of the players was playing a ninja, which from I can't remember what source book that was from. And he came up across this ancient enemy who was this paladin, an enemy of his clans. And so he wanted to like chuck him off of a roof or something. So we went through the rules on the fly for a grappling and decided never to do that again.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because it was like a 17th level ninja versus a 22nd level paladin. It wasn't a
Oh,
single
good Lord.
case. Yeah. Thank you for joining me today on Gamers Explain. Today we discussed the various differences between play-by-post and live gaming and where one shines and the other doesn't. Obviously, the physical social connection you get at a live game is difficult to duplicate on play-by-post. But on the other hand, the immersiveness and the narrative storytelling aspects of play-by-post really shine in ways that are sometimes very difficult to replicate in live games when you don't have a lot of time to prepare what you're going to respond to. There's positive and negatives to both. They're two different ways of gaming, and as I've said several times, nerds will find any way to game and make it work for them. So I hope that you've enjoyed these insights from our dear friends at Gamers Play. Thank you.